ଭାରତର ଲେଖା ନିୟନ୍ତ୍ରକ ତଥା ମହାଲେଖା ପରୀକ୍ଷକ ରିପୋର୍ଟ ଆଜି ଓଡ଼ିଶା ବିଧାନସଭାରେ ଉପସ୍ଥିତ ହୋଇଯାଇଛି। ସ୍ଥାନୀୟ ପ୍ରଧାନ ମହାଲେଖିକାର ଅଡିଟ୍ ୱାନ୍ ଆନୁକୂଲ୍ୟରେ ସିଏଜି ରିପୋର୍ଟ ସମ୍ବନ୍ଧୀୟ ଏକ ଖବରଦାତା ସମ୍ମିଳନୀ ଏଜି ସମ୍ମିଳନୀ କକ୍ଷଠାରେ ଆୟୋଜିତ ହୋଇଯାଇଛି। ଏହି ଖବରଦାତା ସମ୍ମିଳନୀରେ ପ୍ରଧାନ ମହାଲେଖିକାର ରାଜକୁମାର, ମହାଲେଖାକାର ବିଶ୍ୱନାଥ ସିଂ ଯାଦବ, वरिष्ठ उपमहालेखिकार दीपक रघु, उपमहालेखिकार एकता सिंह, सचिन कौशिक, तान्या आंबास्ता, वरिष्ठ लेखा परीक्षा अधिकारी सुकांत कुमार मल्ल और अशोक कुमार नंद उपस्थित थे। दीपक रघु रिपोर्ट संबंध में खबरदाता मानक सम्यक धारणा देथिले।
This provides an overview of the state's finances. As you can see, for the column for the year 21-22 to which this year pertains, to which this report pertains, the state government was able to achieve all the targets adopted in the Odisha FRBM Act for the year 21-22. There was a high revenue surplus of 43,471 crores, which indicated that the state government's receipts were much higher than the state government's expenses for the year 21-22. Instead of a fiscal deficit, which is usually the case with most of the states in India, the state government achieved a fiscal surplus for the year 21-22. This indicated that the sum of receipts for the current year as well as capital receipts such as repayments of loans which state government had previously given out was higher than the sum of expenses for the current year and the capital expenditure incurred by the state government. Also, because of this fiscal surplus, there was also a primary surplus. This is for the first time in the last 5 years that the state government has achieved a primary surplus, which means that its receipts were higher than the net expenditure after excluding interest payments also. So overall, it was from a financial perspective, it was a good performance for the state government. What are the main reasons for the surplus that the state government has achieved? There were three main reasons. Auction of all new and expired mines of coal, iron ore, manganese, bauxite and dolomite during 21-22. Receipt of higher proceeds under central GST share during 21-22 from the central government, and collection of higher amount of state GST during the year compared to the previous year. As a result of this, the revenue receipts for the year 21-22 was a very high 1,53,059 crores, which was 47% higher than the previous year. This showed that there are no financial constraints for the government of Odisha in achieving full utilization of the budgeted amounts for its annual budget. Resources wise, it is rich. When it comes to budget management, the state government surrenders the available budget amounts which it could not spend, which were intended for various purposes at the end of the year. During the year 21-22, the state government surrendered an amount of 35,600 crores on the last day of the financial year, that is on 31st March 22. Surrenders of 100% or more, 100% of total provision was noticed in 14 grants, 29 cases, amounting to a total of 7,757 crores. Meaning the entire budgeted amount for these purposes was not spent at all, and the 100% of the available budget was surrendered by those various governments. The details are at para 3.3.4. When it comes to quality of accounts, during the year 21-22, government released 25,931 crores in all as grants in aid. This is money which is given to various entities for fulfilling their objectives and meeting certain service requirements. Out of this, those entities, the total UCs which are not received amounted to 18,104 crores. That is almost 70% of the amount UCs was not given. When in the absence of UCs, there is no assurance that this 18,104 crores, which was there in the budget and has been released to various entities, was actually spent as intended. Also during the year 21-22, a total of 128 crores was drawn as advances by various entities and government servants. Bills had been submitted against this advance drawn for only 58 lakhs, 0.58 crores against the advances drawn by the 31st of March 22. Therefore, there is no assurance that the remaining advance amount was actually used correctly by the advance holders. This has been pointed out to the government, and they are in the process of either adjusting or recovering these outstanding balances. Those were the main salient points from report number 1. We now move on to report number 2. report number 2 of CAG for the year 23 was on implementation of DBT in payment of post-matric scholarship to eligible students in Odisha. In this, audit had selected two schemes for examination. One was the post-matric scholarship scheme, which is implemented by the SC/ST Development Department, and the Medhavruti scheme, which is implemented by the Higher Education Department. Under PMS, during the years that we covered in audit, 4 years, a total of 2,358 crores had been disbursed to beneficiaries during those 4 years. And under Medhavruti, during a 3-year period, 2017 to 18 to 19-20, 73.4 crores had been spent. The objective of this audit was to verify that eligible beneficiaries had been covered adequately by the schemes and that no ineligible beneficiary had received the payment under the scheme. So, there are some basic steps that have to be taken to adopt the payments framework for direct benefits transfer. That is direct payment of government funds to beneficiaries' bank accounts. So, these basic steps include utilization of services provided by the National Payments Corporation of India, NPCI, which ensures that there are no failed transactions. That is, government wants to give scholarship money, but due to incorrect bank details, etc., there is a failed transaction. So, there is a service available from NPCI called VLOOKUP, which ensures that failed transactions are minimized. So, we noticed that that particular service had not been used, which resulted in 27.86 crores, which was intended for eligible beneficiaries being returned to the treasury. Also, the state DBT cell was supposed to ensure that DBT cells were also formed in the two departments which were implementing these schemes, that is the SC/ST department and the Higher Education department. But they had not constituted these DBT cells. As a result, the identification of all eligible beneficiaries who could have got scholarship was not carried out, and 100% Aadhaar seeding, which is to ensure that there was no duplication of payment, was also not carried out. These matters were discussed during the meetings held by the state DBT cell, but no follow-up action was taken. Again, coming to the inadequate coverage of beneficiaries, we noticed that the coverage of the SC/ST students was 30 to 42% on average per year lower than the numbers which were admitted to 11th class during the period 17 to 21. It is highly unlikely that this entire missing percentage of 30 to 42%, all of them were ineligible. So it indicates the real risk that there was inadequate coverage of the eligible beneficiaries. Under Medhavruti scheme, specifically under the postgraduate courses and technical and professional courses, the coverage was only 68% and 13%, which is being flagged over here. The main reason for this low coverage was that the department had not adequately covered the grassroots level awareness programs in terms of posters, hoardings, pamphlets, which was intended under the scheme guidelines. A study conducted by the state DBT cell itself in 2018 had concluded that there was lack of awareness among the potential beneficiaries. This is a very important paragraph, para number 4.5.2. This talks about the absence of a documented procedure for verification of educational institutions which were forwarding the details of the beneficiaries who were students enrolled at those educational institutions. What we noticed is that there was no documented procedure at all to verify that institutions which were forwarding applications for scholarships were actually registered, affiliated and recognized by the state government. So, in the absence of this documented procedure, nobody had gone and physically examined the classroom and hostel facilities, number of teaching and non-teaching personnel available at these institutions prior to issuing user ID and password for them to forward applications for scholarship. As a result, potentially even non-existent institutions and institutions which had no infrastructure had been provided usernames and passwords, and they were forwarding applications for students apparently enrolled with them. This is a great risk which we noticed during the review of documents. Later on, we'll talk about what we saw when we went for physical inspection. But very briefly over here, as we mentioned, audit conducted joint physical inspection in 16 of these institutions which were registered under bodies which are not recognized by the state government. And we found that in 8 institutions, the institutions did not exist at all. And the remaining 8 institutions had very deficient infrastructure compared to the number of beneficiaries which they had claimed. The next issue is on payment to the scholarship money to the bank accounts of the institutions instead of students. So in the sample check that we conducted, we noticed that 1.37 crores pertaining to 276 SC/ST students was transferred to the bank accounts of the institutions, private sector institutions, instead of the bank accounts of the students. Now these are all post-matric scholarship or Medhavriti students. So they are all close to being adults, they should have their own bank accounts. Despite that, the money was transferred to the bank accounts of the institutions. As we saw in the last point, there was a risk that institutions were not really bona fide, in which case the risk becomes all the more that money was transferred to the bank accounts of the institutions instead of the students. The SC/ST department had transferred maintenance allowance. This is specifically for students who are staying in hostels. They had transferred close to 70 lakhs to the bank accounts of the institutions for hostel instead of the 699 students who had stayed. And the institutions later on had transferred the money to the students only after delays of 36 to 403 days, which was entirely avoidable. Coming to the actual processing of applications received by the department, there were significant delays in processing applications under post-matric scholarship. Average delay was 82 days, that is almost 3 months, which is quarter of the academic year. And the time taken to make the payment of scholarship ranged up to 378 days, which is more than a single academic year. Under PMS, the payment of arrears of scholarship money, whenever it was to be paid, we noticed that the delays ranged for 70,000 students for 365 days to 1460 days, that is 1 to 4 years after they had applied and were supposed to get the arrears of payment of the scholarship. So that rather defeated the purpose of the scholarship scheme for students. There were significant delays in the publication of advertisement inviting applications under Medhavriti. So time taken to advertise itself ranged from 4 to 9 months. That is almost 3/4 of the academic year was taken just to advertise the scholarships available. Having covered the inadequate processing, now we move on to the cases that we noticed where duplicate payments were made to students. So we noticed 3 different kinds of duplicate payments which are being made. The first is payment to the same person under 2 different schemes. So we noticed payment made under post-matric scholarship as well as Medhavriti. We noticed payment made under post-matric scholarship and Banishri scholarship, which is implemented by another department, and payment made to nursing students under both post-matric scholarship as well as National Health Mission. So it showed that for all the scholarship schemes that are being operated by Government of Odisha, there is no duplication being carried out to make sure that beneficiaries are receiving the scholarship under one defined scheme under which they are enrolled, even though the scheme guidelines themselves say that duplication is not allowed. The second kind of duplication is related to the same beneficiary having applied multiple times under different applications for the same scheme. So under this we noticed that under PMS there were more than 1,28,000 duplicate applications which are found to be received by indicating enrollment of the same student under different institutions. That is, student's name, father's name, date of birth is matching, but different institution enrolled and application IDs are different. Both of them are getting payment. The payment was also made against 973 duplicate applications amounting to 2.43 crores, for which we have proper documents evidence in the sample check conducted. Similarly, under Medhavriti, 17,291 duplicate applications were found to have been received from the same applicants. The third kind of duplication was people are applying for the scholarship under the scheme for the same stage of study. That is, a person has studied for BSc and then is applying again for BA. Somebody studied BCom and then applying again for BA. This is not permissible under the scheme, but we noticed that 3.71 crores was found to have been paid against applications made for different courses at the same stage of study under this. These paras are 5.1.1, 5.1.2 and 5.1.3. So this is again on the basis of payments database from the different schemes. Now we come to what I had earlier talked about, suspected fraud. So we had earlier flagged the risk that some of these institutions may not be bona fide. They may exist only on paper. They are simply aggregating scholarship applications and forwarding them without anybody going there and physically checking the status of those institutions. So we noticed that 15.79 crores is the suspected amount of siphoning off of funds due to this kind of absence of inspections and verification of the institutions made to 5185 beneficiaries belonging to institutions registered under 2 affiliating bodies which are not recognized by the state government. These are called Bharat Sevat Samaj and NCVRT, these are not recognized by the state government, but institutions claim to be affiliated to these two bodies and had forwarded applications for scholarship and had received them also. So when audit inspected the premises of these 16 institutions which were registered with these two non-recognized bodies, we noticed that 8 institutions did not exist at all at the reported premises. So we have no basis for why those particular institutions' applications are accepted and why the physical verification of the institution was not carried out. In the remaining 8 institutions, we noticed that they had stopped functioning after 2020, after rejection of further applications by the district welfare officer of the SC/ST department. We noticed that one institution did not have its own physical infrastructure at all, even though it claimed to exist. The photograph is there. In the other 7 institutions, the infrastructure was severely inadequate, which meant that comparison to the number of students which were claimed to be admitted, the infrastructure didn't exist to support them in terms of classrooms also. One classroom was available with capacity of 60 for 792 students that it claimed that enrolled. So the photographs are self-explanatory. This is para 6.1.1. The other cases of suspected fraud are detailed at para 6.1.2. This regards the payment of post-matric scholarship for students who had left their studies. That is, they had apparently enrolled only for one semester or one particular year and then discontinued their studies, but had been paid the scholarship for the entire period for which the duration of the course was. So we noticed that 2,997 students of 23 sampled institutions in 6 districts had left their courses midway but were paid a total amount of 7.36 crores. This finding on its own may simply be explained away as students are dropping out but payment continued. But when coupled with the risk of non-existent institutions, we feel that that is very risky and it is suspected fraud. A specific case study in case of an institution called Shakuntala Sudarshan Institute of Technology in Mayurbhanj. Here we analyzed the semester results of the batches of 16-19 to 17-20 and found that 280 students had not cleared the final exams and had discontinued their studies. 2.36 crores had been paid to these 280 students even though they had discontinued studies. When we went to the bank account where they were registered, we noticed that they had obtained, the institution had obtained a bank mandate saying that whatever scholarship money is received in these accounts should be transferred to the bank account of the institution. And all the bank accounts of 1077 institutions were found to be opened only in one bank, Bank of Baroda, Church Compound Branch, Baleshwar, which is in a different district. In all these cases, the introducers for opening the bank account were the office bearers of the institution, and mobile phone numbers given in the accounts were also those of the office bearers of the institution. Audit contacted 14 of the recipients of these post-matric scholarship, and they said that they had not submitted any application for post-matric scholarship at all. So that again establishes that these are cases of suspected fraud with the institution having drawn the government funds. This was again para 6.1.2. Those were the major findings from report number 2.